I've recently returned from a 2-week trip to Mexico, and today I'm very excited to tell you about two of my favourite excursions from the whole trip. I'd had recommendations to visit some of the X parks from a colleague at work who was a regular visitor to Mexico, and so I'd looked into them before we landed. We only had time to do 2 of the parks, and the first one we did was Xcaret, as chosen by my partner. I believe Xcaret was the first of the X parks to open in the early 90s. Xcaret is just south of Playa del Carmen in the heart of the Riviera Maya, and it is absolutely huge. It really is a park for everyone, and I would describe it as a mixture of a zoo, an outdoor museum, and a water park. We booked the excursion through our tour operator, TUI, and we actually used the rep in our hotel because he could offer a discount if you booked 2 or more X parks. Also, it was easier to get the transport to and from the hotel included. In the end, I think we saved about 15% by booking the 2 parks through the rep. At Xcaret, everyone gets 1 buffet meal included at the main restaurant at the front of the park, but we purchased something called Xcaret Plus, which gives you a choice of where to eat, albeit you're still confined to a buffet meal. We also had a locker included, which was invaluable throughout the day. The main attractions seem to be the underground cenote, a long river which takes you through the park underground. This is definitely what I was most looking forward to, especially because it was a hot day. The water, though, was absolutely freezing when you first got in, but I felt that I quickly got used to it. There wasn't really a current in the water, so you did have to swim. You couldn't just float through it like a traditional lazy river. As well as the cenote, there are so many animals across the park, including jaguars, birds, butterflies, sea turtles, and more. I loved the aquarium section, which had really interesting, short information panels about the different types of sea creatures. It was particularly cool to see a huge starfish and just how slowly they move. They also have some old Mayan ruins, like a tiny version of Chichen Itza, which were interesting to see. However, we'd been to Chichen Itza the previous week, and so it was a bit underwhelming in comparison. I've done a separate video covering my trip to Chichen Itza, and I will link that at the end of this video. The park also has areas dedicated to Mexican culture, including a reconstruction of a church at the top of a hill, and a fake cemetery, which is a bit odd, but it was fascinating to see how colourful the graves were, and that they really showed the person's character. I've certainly never seen anything like it in a UK graveyard. The big attraction is the 2-hour show at the end of the night called the Espectacular, which shows the history of Mexico and then plays homage to various places within Mexico. I felt that the show could have been condensed into 90 minutes or perhaps even less, as many of the sections just felt like they dragged on for a little bit too long, and I felt keen for them to end and to get on to the next one. Maybe it's because I'm not Mexican and didn't feel patriotic or anything, but it definitely was a spectacular, with hundreds of singers, dancers and musicians. Overall, Xcaret was one of my favourite excursions that we did throughout the trip. We arrived at the park at about 9:30 or 10 a.m, and I was a bit worried that we wouldn't have enough to do to keep us busy until the show at 7 p.m, but actually, we managed to do everything we wanted, and it was just the right amount of time. It really was a perfect combination of so many different attractions and things to see, and so I would definitely recommend that you spend a day at Xcaret on your trip to the Riviera Maya. The second X park that we visited was Xel-Ha, and this is the one that I was most excited about. The photos of the huge river and the lighthouse were so beautiful, and I love a water park. We also booked this excursion through our TUI rep at the hotel, and we were picked up at 7:30 a.m. as the park was just 20 minutes away near Tulum. We arrived at about 8:15 a.m. and the park opened at 8:30. The first thing you see before getting to the turnstiles, after the obligatory gift shop, is a small-scale replica of Tulum, which was an old Mayan port. We hadn't actually visited Tulum during our visit, but I imagine it would be really cool to compare the town now to the scale model. The downside of getting to Xel-Ha so early is that nothing really opened until about 9 AM, including most of the locker areas. We eventually got a locker key for the red lockers, which were reasonably central, so that was okay, but it was the third set of lockers that we saw, and neither of the other two were open yet. Because everything seemed quiet, my partner and I decided to wander around the park to kill some time before breakfast, which started at 9:30 AM. That's something else that needs mentioning. Xel-Ha is all-inclusive, both for food and drink. We ate at the Xula Vista restaurant, an international buffet which was conveniently right next to the red lockers. It was heaving with people and there wasn't heaps of choice for breakfast, but it gave us some energy for the day ahead. Before breakfast we did an anti-clockwise tour of the park, and it was so quiet everywhere once you were away from the hub of the park. We walked up towards the entrance to the river, and along the way we saw the manatee area, although we didn't actually see any of the manatees until later in the day, and by the way, they were huge! We then headed west to see the Mayan cave, very underwhelming, and a couple of the cenotes which you can't swim in. We then walked across the floating bridge and back to the lockers. We also took a trip to the garden area near the lighthouse before going down the slides on the lighthouse. I like to wear water shoes, but they're forbidden on the slides, along with any loose items in pockets. The slide was faster than I expected, but it was a bit boring because it was just a spiral. Largely, our day consisted of cycling up to the top of the river and then floating/swimming down it. If you don't want to do the 7-ish minute bike ride, then you can either walk, which would probably take about 20 minutes at a decent pace, or ride in a train, which took about 5 minutes. We did all three, and cycling was probably my favourite, albeit the bikes don't have typical handbrakes, and the terrain was a little bumpy and narrow in places, so it perhaps wouldn't be suitable for anyone who's quite new to cycling. You can then decide which route you want to take into the river, the snorkeling route or the rubber ring route. With the rubber ring route, you get into a rubber ring, and with the snorkeling route, you just get straight into the water with your life jacket on. We found the rubber ring impossible to control, as that part of the river was so narrow and there were mangroves each side. You weren't supposed to touch them, but everyone kept bumping into them. I didn't do much snorkeling during our visit, but my partner said that there wasn't that much to see, probably because there were so many people swimming everywhere. Having said that, the river was so huge that it never felt that busy, and there were quieter areas towards the edges if you needed some space. Along the river there were fun things to do, like a tightrope walk thing, and zip lines into the water. This definitely broke up the long journey down to sea and was a lot of fun. Xel-Ha has a lot of paid activities, and so you could book some of those if you wanted to. Examples included swimming with dolphins and scuba diving. This was really different to Xcaret, where pretty much everything was included. It seems a bit odd because Xel-Ha is probably not an all-day park without doing at least one paid excursion. We didn't do any paid activities, and our bus back to the hotel left just after 5 PM. I think we would have been happier to leave a bit earlier because we ended up floating down the river one last time to kill some time at the end of the day. Everything was very quiet by about 3:30ish, which makes sense given what I said about it not being an all-day park. We just took some leisurely time getting dressed afterwards and wandering around the various shops. Going back to the food, because it was all inclusive, we had some lunch in the afternoon as well. This time we went to La Terrazza, which was just around the corner from the red lockers, and it offered fast food. I felt that this food was better than the breakfast at Xula Vista, but you can't really go wrong with a burger, pizza and chicken nuggets. Overall, I really enjoyed Xel-Ha, and because there wasn't that much to do, it was a much more relaxed day than we had at Xcaret. It definitely would have been better to be there from maybe 10 till 4 rather than 8:30 till 5, but I can't say that I felt bored. If you're not happy to just float down the river, then I would perhaps skip this park, as ultimately that's the main attraction. But it probably is great for kids who just love being in the water. This is the third video I've done about the excursions that we did during our 2-week trip to Mexico, and so I'll link the other 2 videos here in case you want to watch those as well. I've also got some videos coming reviewing the Bahia Principe resorts, which is where we stayed, so make sure to hit my face to subscribe so you know when those videos come out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!